Gatekeep hip hop, gatekeep R&B, gatekeep your culture, period. As an Afro-Latina, like, trust me, I know firsthand the erasure is real. For context, Latino music such as like reggaeton, salsa, bachata, just to name a few, are historically black Latino music. They have their roots in black Latinidad. And as a result, the artists that used to have the biggest impact and largest visibility in these genres were black Latino artists. Fast forward to today, the artists with the biggest impact and the largest amount of visibility in these genres are white Latino artists.
You're trying to convince us that because one culture doesn't care, we shouldn't either, even though we have a very different history and experience. You also try to make us dismiss the racism, discrimination, blackfishing, and profiting of black culture that have led us to create a specific boundary. And of course, you like to act like we gatekeep our entire culture, even though we've been known to share our music, our food, our entertainment, our fashion, and so much more. And then you'll try to convince us that we're the problem, that we're racist, that we want everything to be separate, just because we set a few boundaries out of the multitude of things we share of our culture with society. And this is all due to the generational and historical mindset of not liking the word no. That's the entire reason that colonization happened. And see, it starts off as sharing, then it goes to stealing, then it goes to erasure. That's why we're just finding out now that Elvis stole songs from black artists, and why something comes out every other day that something was actually made or started by a person of color. So you can say those things if you want. I'm just letting you know what type of person it makes you look like.
The Afro-Latina woman's message found support from many who echoed the need for cultural preservation. Others emphasized that black communities have historically been generous in sharing their culture through music, fashion, and art, but that this generosity has often been met with exploitation.
That's blasphemous. I can't help it, man. This is blasphemous. If you too had a visceral reaction to this kind of praise break by this Asian praise team, it's probably because, as black people, it comes across as cultural appropriation. There's a line, but who gets to determine what that line is? There's no doubt that black Americans have the right to claim this form of music and expression due to the historical context from which this art was birthed. This music was birthed from the horrors and the trauma of slavery. When we speak of the Negro spirituals and praise break music, both emerged from enslaved African people in the South. The latter certainly have roots in the ring shouts, particularly on the Sea Islands off the coast of Georgia and South Carolina. To some, many will say this music is for everybody. However, shouldn't a non-black person or a non-black American who wishes to sing a Negro spiritual be counseled on the history of the people who created this art? If a non-black person sings a Negro spiritual or a gospel song without fully understanding the historical significance of the music, I would question whether or not they have a right to sing it at all. If you, as a non-black person who is singing this music, and yet in your heart it still remains hardened towards black Americans, then my request of you is not to sing this music. This music is not for you. It comes across as disrespect to our pain and suffering in this country.
Let me compose myself. Okay. So the Black Classical Artists of Louisville organization put on a traditional Negro spiritual vocal competition. And let me show y'all the winners. I'm sorry. At some point, you just have to laugh at this stuff. Like, honestly, everybody in this whole shebang is trifling. All the white people who took it upon themselves to apply, the black people who let them. It's just, everybody in this whole thing is a mess. Everybody is guilty, right? And I want to talk about this from the perspective of a black classical musician. Now, if you didn't know, I played the violin for a very long time. I played it all throughout college, once a year to play the violin, etc., 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 right? So I'm going to talk about this from the perspective of somebody who knows something about music and knows that there is a serious lack of diversity in music, right? And I'm bringing that up because I decided to go on this organization's page and look a little deeper. Look at this picture. Look at this picture. 2 out of the 7 people in the picture is white. Go ahead and do the math. 2 divided by 7 times 100. That's 28.5%. Basically 30. So 30% of the Black Classical Artists of Louisville organization is white. That's what you telling me? But then I take a moment to actually put myself in these people's shoes, because that's something that I always exercise in my personal life. I always try to see where people are coming from and why they're doing the stuff that they do, right? And as a Black classical musician, I'm well aware of the very, very serious lack of Black classical musicians. I've been there. I understand it. There have been many times where I was the only Black person in an orchestra, or maybe there was 2 or 3 of us in a whole big full orchestra, right? This is my thing though. Why on earth would your solution to the problem of the lack of Black classical musicians be to let white people into the organization, and even go so far as to let them win a Negro spiritual contest? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? This is my thing. If y'all couldn't find nobody in Louisville to compete in this Negro spiritual competition, then you could have posted on social media and be like, hey, look, we're gonna open up the applicant pool. You ain't gotta live in Louisville, but you gotta be African American to be singing these Negro spirituals. You could have done something, anything other than, like, what? Instead of having white people with, I would have scrapped the whole competition. If no African Americans applied, I would be like, we just not even finna have this, because what? You know what I'm saying? Like, what is going through your minds, bro, to be this doofy? Like, you gotta be so doofy, bro. And I know good and well there's gonna be some cornballs who come and comment, because again, I spent years in orchestras and bands around these fools. They're gonna come comment like, music is universal, my dog. Diggity life. It doesn't matter. No, it's not. Some music is not for you, and this is that. Can you imagine a white person singing a Negro spiritual? To Blue Lake in 2014, Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp, right? And I was part of the International Youth Symphony Orchestra, right? But there was also a choir, okay? Now, we was buddy with the choir. Not really. We ain't talked to them for real. But we practiced with the choir sometime, because we were playing, whatever that song is, bells are ringing, hearts are singing, but the whole actual symphony. That shit was like an hour and a half, bro. So the choir was there singing that, whatever, right? So I went and I looked up some of the choir's other performances. They was singing Wade in the Water. A choir full of white people and 2 Black people. Now, if I'm not mistaken, at least the Black girl had the solo, I believe, right? But they still look crazy. It's a choir full of white people talking about God's gonna trouble the water. Like, are you kidding me? Do you know how you look? I would have been like, I'm not finna do this. I'm not finna do this, bro. Because, like, you're singing the songs of somebody who is fleeing your oppression. First of all, not only can you never reach what they was feeling, you'll never be able to get there. But also, just, why would you try to anyway? Like, oh my God. On one hand, of course, there's blame to be put on white people, because why would you apply to a Negro spiritual competition? Like, what, right? But then on the other hand, at some point you have to blame African Americans. Because a lot of this shit happens because African Americans let them do this stuff. Like, are you kidding me, bro? Nobody at no point was like, nah, this is ridiculous. We ain't finna have no white people competing in this, much less winning. You know what I'm saying? Like, what, bro? Like, I'm flabbergasted. I'm flabbergasted. You know, at some point you gotta look at African Americans and say some of this shit is our fault. No, your fault, because I'm not included in that. Some of this shit is your fault. Because a lot of times, white people do what you let them do.
Look at all those black folks giving permission. So what's clear is that they're at a black church, and clearly this Korean, I would imagine a Korean choir, it could be Chinese, who knows, were invited to participate in the program. And here's the thing I have a problem with. We all know how Asians are. They want to be white adjacent. So while they're enjoying themselves in the midst of black musical excellence, they will go to their communities and still espouse a sense of white supremacy because they're not connected historically to the context of this music. They're not connected to the pain, the trauma, the oppression that birthed this music. We are our own enemies as black folks. We should never be condoning this until they do right by us. I'm talking about all non-black people. Do the right thing.
The Nathaniel Dent Chorale is a 20-person ensemble. I founded the chorale 19 years ago to be an ensemble and an organization that helped to spread the awareness of Afrocentric choral music, not only in Canada, but around the world. The spiritual is a music that was created out of the experience of slavery. It was encoded with ideas of escape and freedom. It was encoded with things that taught themselves the days of the week or the months of the year, or how to count, all the things that were supposedly forbidden in order to keep them docile and suppressed. The music that they created came out of that place and was really used to sing their freedom into existence. The music itself is invigorating, you know, and yes, sometimes I am moved to tears. I am close to tears now, even as I say this, because it is so powerful. One of the questions that we have been wrestling with this weekend is the whole question of cultural appropriation. Who should sing spirituals? Can anyone sing spirituals? And it's challenging particularly to hear a spiritual come out of a white face.
Long before gospel emerged in Chicago, its roots took hold in fields and plantations across the Deep South.
Black music has always been a means by which the early enslaved Africans came to understand themselves as a people, that while they come from various areas on the continent, that they have in common this cultural technology of the ring shout.
The ring shout, an African tradition that included elements of sacred dance and prayer to their own gods.
They would take a gourd, a big pot, turn it upside down to muffle the sound, and then they would scream and holler their African chants and rhythms till they go into a frenzy and get the spirit, and then they would be all right for a little while. They had some release.
They don't speak the same languages, but they have that ritual in common.
Oftentimes the slave owners would not allow this worship. They were afraid of it. What are they trying to communicate? So there was a real push to Christianize the enslaved Africans.
Slaves were allowed to attend the same church as slave owners, where they learned the hymns of the Church of England. But they took the traditional European hymn and incorporated the ring shout. The result was an entirely new song, the Black Spiritual.
When the Africans were creating their music, there was no instruments. They actually were forbidden to read and write, and so the leader would lead out the song.
He heard my cry.
The congregation would listen and sing along. The notes don't have to be perfect. Everybody's singing along. Africans' own culture included call and response, improvisations, rhythm, emotion, and those are very important to keep their culture and their spirit together.
So as a result of ethnogenesis, these black Africans, enslaved black Africans, created their own culture of music. So we can't always give credit to, I know a lot of people want to give credit to Europeans. Oh, you got your music from the Europeans. No, we didn't. We heard what the Europeans were doing, and we still decided to do things our way. You don't find our music anywhere in Europe. You don't find funk, you don't find gospel, you don't find the Negro spirituals, you don't find the blues, you don't find jazz in Europe. Only in America. Black people in America created these genres. Stop acting as if white folks helped us create it. They did not.
The words we're saying have a double meaning. So anytime you hear anything about traveling shoes or chariots or wheels, somebody's getting ready to run. And so you take a Negro spiritual, swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home. That chariot is movement. That chariot is swinging low, picking you up, putting you on that Underground Railroad, taking you somewhere to freedom, So when we sing those songs, it's like, something's getting ready to happen. So I looked over Jordan, and what did I see? Jordan, that was metaphor for the Ohio River. A band of angels coming after me. Those conductors coming to help you. Coming forth to carry me home. So they had all kind of little messages. And the slave master would hear us singing and say, oh, don't they sound pretty happy tonight? Next day, 2 or 3 people gone.
Sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home, swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Oh, I come from south, from way down south, where the corn and potatoes used to grow. There's great big elegant pictures show, and my old Kentucky home is a French chateau. Way down south in Dixie, swing low, sweet.
Hey, I think we got something there. I say we have.
Carry me home. Oh, I come from south.
So this is how they trivialize our music. They ignore the oppression and make it appear as if life for Black people was fun and games.
But in this country, we don't talk about slavery. We don't talk about lynching. We don't talk about the horrors of this history of racial inequality. Many of the people who were with us last week came up to me and said, I just realized I've never seen a sculpture about slavery before in my life. They'd never really been in a place where they were confronted with the legacy of lynching in a way that was tangible and visible. And I think that implicates our ability to move forward, to create real equality. And so, yes, it is important that we create a new landscape, that we erect symbols and statues and monuments and markers that push our nation in a different direction, rather than protecting these false narratives that I think we have built to reinforce that same ideology of white supremacy. And I think our artists, our sculptors, our writers, our musicians have a critical role to play in what I see as essentially narrative work. I don't think we've ever felt the kind of shame we should feel about what we did to Native Americans, about what we did during slavery, about what we did during lynching, what we did during segregation. And I don't think of shame as a bad thing for us to experience. When you do something shameful, there has to be some moment of remorse and regret and repentance and truth-telling. That's what leads to redemption and recovery and repair and restoration. I represent people who do bad things. None of them expects to be paroled if they're not willing to admit the wrongfulness of their crime. And a lot of times when people hear me talking about this, I think they get a little edgy because we've become such a punitive society, Amy. I think we have the highest rate of incarceration in the world. We're so punitive in America that we're unwilling sometimes to admit our mistakes, to acknowledge our wrongdoings because we fear punishment. And for me, what's been important about this project is to make clear to people, I'm not interested in talking about our history because I want to punish America. I think talking about our history is the way we liberate America, the way we move to a different place. We get to some place where we acknowledge the pain of this path so we can recover. I do believe that our country needs truth and repair, truth and reconciliation, but I believe those things are sequential. You can't get the repair, you can't get the reconciliation until you first tell the truth.